Led was a decent character at the start. What got under my skin when it came to his relationship with CY. This was because Led was one of the strongest heroes, but also one of the most immature. Hello, welcome to my first comic review. I'm your host, Kristen, and today I will be reviewing the comic Chakra, Battle of the Titans, by Mara Arven Pompili. In case you're interested in buying this comic afterward, content warnings are animal injury/death, murder, nightmares, hallucinations, blood, mentions of abandonment, strangulation, explosions, possessions, and fire. I will start with the overall plot, then world building, and finally the characters. Since I am more interested in the story, I will not be critiquing the art, as I see amazing artwork as more of a bonus rather than a need for a comic to be considered good. Also, this review will be spoiler-free until between these timestamps, so if you want to avoid spoilers, I recommend skipping over that section. Now that those notes are out of the way, let's begin. According to the summary of the comic, the plot is as follows. Chakra, Battle of the Titans, is an original characters comic inspired by Clover Studios' Okami. CY, Leadneck, Orca, Helio, Cheetah, Model, and Kuma are in charge to find and protect the Destiny Sword, an extremely powerful weapon that can reverse the fate of everyone. Their mission is very risky, but at the same time, they will also have to keep an eye on the evil Wolf Jackal and his army of Zodiac demons. The plot was pretty decent for a debut. Chapter 1 kicked off with a fight scene after the first few pages against a wolf named Steel, which set the tone as to just how action-packed the comic would be. It was also nice that the two most important characters, Led and CY, were introduced right away, along with getting glimpses of their personalities. The next chapter was good in that it wasted no time introducing the rest of the Chakra heroes and all of their powers by having them defeat a minor villain and receiving the main quest. However, I did feel like there were one too many fight scenes in the comic. For instance, the Chakra heroes going after the Destiny Sword and then having to steal it back from the Zodiac demons was fine. However, the third fight where the demons attack the heroes with the sword, not in play, felt like it could have been combined with another fight and achieved a similar outcome. A second issue I had was the amount of characters. The Chakra heroes and the Zodiac demons combined resulted in a total of 20 designs and personalities. At least 4 of the heroes and 3 of the demons had significant arcs, which was quite a lot to keep straight. Plus, with 7 or more total main characters, some of the arcs ended up feeling rushed or like they didn't go into enough depth. This is why I will not include 4 demons in my character analysis, as some of them barely had roles. Despite being a visual medium, there was also a lot of telling in this comic. For example, Helio's distrust of strangers, and the reason for it was stated to Kubura instead of letting the reader infer why. It also only told about some of the characters' personalities, such as Model being kind and not holding grudges. All that said, I enjoyed how the heroes used their powers in various battles. It was presented in a way that didn't feel repetitive when it came to how the heroes dealt with the demons, except for when it was purposeful. The character designs were also fantastic, as each demon and hero looked unique. The world building in this comic was okay. I liked how each hero getting their powers was explained to Kubura since he was the newest member. It was a natural way to transition into everyone's backstories, including some of Kubura's past. The chakra power essentially being a second soul was neat, although most of the heroes obtaining their powers due to being injured did feel a tad redundant. It didn't detract from my overall enjoyment. Unfortunately, that was most of the world building the reader received. CY being part of the goddess Ajna and how she discovered that, along with their chakra, was never explored. The chakra pillars that the heroes came across also weren't detailed, such as who built them, why they were constructed, and how studying them could reveal weaknesses in the heroes. The backstory of the two main demons and Jackal weren't brought up either. I'll go more into detail about this during the character sections, but it would have been nice to know why most of them had joined the demons to begin with, or why each demon wanted to take over all of Japan. Regardless, scenes such as exploring the underground forest and CY seeing the basement of the island were interesting. The way the heroes navigated each location kept my attention, especially with each ambush Jackal set up. Speaking of her, CY definitely had a fascinating arc. It was mentioned during the first chapter that the only reason she survived puphood after being abandoned was due to a voice in her mind that told her where to find food and water. Although CY was uncertain as to how much of Ajna was really her and vice versa. This was added to in later chapters when CY received visions and a prophecy. Sad to say, she was the only one who could see them, so the others were a tad skeptical. It was a fascinating mystery as I wondered who, or what, the shadowy demon was and how it and the prophecy related to CY. CY's struggles against Oaken the dog and Jackal were also exciting. Even though she transformed into Ajna to try and gain the upper hand, CY kept being bested by Oniken destroying the orbs that sustained said form. Afterwards, Jackal would always attempt to stab CY with the Destiny Sword. Watching CY strive to overcome Oniken's powers again and again was tense as she slowly learned what to do. Led was a decent character at the start. What got under my skin when it came to his relationship with CY. This was because Led was one of the strongest heroes, but also one of the most immature. When he saw that Kuma may have been interested in CY, instead of talking it out with CY or asking if she had any feelings for Kuma, Led proceeded to get jealous. Thankfully, CY called him out on it, but Led still didn't reflect on his behavior a couple hours later. Furthermore, Led and CY's relationship was quite flat. Beyond CY saving his life and his family, the two didn't interact much beyond the first chapter. Part of their backstory claimed that they had traveled together to find the other heroes for a year. However, with only a single flashback to it, I wasn't convinced that they had become close friends during that time. Besides his off-putting attitude regarding CY, Lead did contribute quite a lot to the fights. Having power over the ground, Lead was able to hold his own in a couple of fights. I also admired the part where he attempted to save CY from drowning, but used the lesson he learned in that moment to help someone else later on. Despite him being gruff, I liked Helio. Even though he had ice powers, he was one of the more hot-headed heroes regarding character interactions. After learning his backstory, his mistrust of Kobura was understandable, especially since the former snake demon had changed sides so quickly. Helio, having been betrayed by his own packmates, his family, had been a huge blow to both his confidence and his willingness to trust others. However, snapping at Model was uncalled for, so I'm glad Helio decided to apologize after cooling down. Another detail I adored was his relationship with Kuma. It went as far back as when they first had met, when Kuma had fallen unconscious due to being mauled by a bear. Helio had stayed by Kuma's side the entire night, begging him not to die. It was a fantastic scene that showed how even with his short temper, Helio did in fact care deeply for those around him. Though he was the biggest of the group, Kuma was a sweetheart. For example, after Helio shouted at Model, Kuma went off to talk to Helio. Kuma allowed Helio to vent out his feelings, and then encouraged him to apologize after the latter was worried that Model wouldn't forgive him. Despite being a gentle giant, however, Kuma also held his own when it came to the demons. Kuma definitely knew how to use his bulk to his advantage, as he often took on zodiac demons that were around his size and strength in order to give his teammates a better fighting chance. He even defended Kobura from Omen, the new, much larger snake demon. Kuma's sensitive, caring nature was also presented as a bit of a natural flaw. After a tragic accident, which is too much of a spoiler to get into, he blamed himself for it and was extremely worried that the same thing would happen again. As such, this resulted in Kuma running away, which led to another horrible incident. I didn't really love Model. Her personality, beyond being kind and forgiving, was pretty much non-existent. The fact that she trusted everyone and didn't really want to fight in battles was never presented as a flaw. Instead, it helped her get out of situations and even convinced Kobura to leave the Zodiac demons. This made Model come across as too perfect, especially since both Helio and Kobura developed a crush after only seeing her. Cheetah was supposed to be the comic relief as far as I could tell, but he was hit or miss a majority of the time. Personally, I felt like most of his jokes and puns were ill-timed and sucked the tension from any scenes. It was also irritating when Cheetah seemed to try and flirt with or annoy Orca, since his teasing wasn't reciprocated. In other words, only Cheetah was having fun. That said, I thought it was nice when he and Orca worked together to save their friends. I didn't mind Orca as a character. However, her personality was too similar to Helio's. They were both hot-headed and distrustful of others, but only Orca's attitude wasn't fully examined out of the two. The only explanation I could glean was that her background of only relying on herself and her brother had made Orca cautious. However, I would have liked to see the inciting incident that caused her to have trust issues in the first place. For an antagonist, I found Lord Jackal to be rather basic. His reason for wanting to take over Japan was never explained. This, along with never exploring Jackal's backstory, made him feel less like a threat and more like a cardboard cutout, not to mention the gross panel where he creeped onto Kiri. It made me wonder why the demons bothered to follow him at all. Sure, Jackal hired the Zodiac demons, but money can only do so much, especially since during every fight, when Jackal always attempted to sneak off with the Destiny Sword like a dirty coward. What was stopping the demons from getting rid of him and taking the sword for themselves? As the youngest demon, Karburo was quite cute. I wasn't sure how old he was supposed to be, but from his appearance and attitude, he was clearly still a kid. His motivation for joining the Zodiac demons in order to get his brother to notice him was sweet, but also misguided. Honestly, it was realistic for a child, especially since Kobura mentioned how Ryo's personality had suddenly changed one night. The same went for his instant crush on Model, which thankfully she didn't reciprocate. Instead, most of the heroes treated Kobura like a little cousin. Takiri had an okay role. She acted similar to a parental figure to Kobura in that she was supportive and wanted to keep him from getting in trouble. The fact that she left the demons after Jackal hit her was excellent, as it showed that Takiri understood that she deserved better. Finally, Takiri also played a critical role in helping out the heroes. Although he was Kobura's best friend, Katek didn't get too much screen time. The conflict between the former friends was alright, but I felt like it could have been better. For instance, when Kobura was detailing the reason for joining the Zodiac demons, he could have also mentioned how he met Katek and how they became pals. Kobura could have also thrown in why Katek joined the demons during one of their fights in order to give Katek more depth. That way, Katek and Kobura's conflict would have had more weight to it. Since Ryo was Jackal's head general, I expected him to be the most powerful and vicious demon of the group. Unfortunately, I was disappointed that Ryo was a pushover when it came to trying to square up with CY. He also lacked the traits that I expected to be innate to a general, such as foresight and planning. Instead, Ryo was rash, which resulted in his poor performance during the fights. It made me confused as to what Jackal ever saw in Ryo to begin with. Out of all the demons, Onakin was one of my favorites. He had the most skill and knew how to use it when facing CY. The mask he wore also added mystery to his character. Onakin's backstory was also cool, which I'll get into during the spoilers. Alright, now onto the spoilers. I'll count to 3 seconds if you want to keep this comic spoiler free. 1, 2, 3. And here we go! Kuma getting stabbed by the Destiny Sword was intense. I was honestly surprised that he survived, given how said weapon destroyed souls. It made sense, but was also tragic, that his chakra died in Kuma's place in order to spare him. Not to mention that Ryo and Onakin being connected was a detail that I didn't see coming. The fact that Steel had attacked Onakin and ripped off his face was brutal enough, but to have Steel take over Ryo's body as a spirit made the situation more tragic. It had been foreshadowed with Ryo's sudden personality change, as well as his grudge towards CY. Onakin wanting to kill Steel's spirit through the sword before the dog demon wasted away was understandable as well. It was also a great twist that Kuma ended up being a vessel for the big bad. The black substance that spread along Kuma's body was due to him becoming possessed after being stabbed by the sword. He only had to give into his anger at Jackal in order for the demon to take full control. In the end though, I was glad to see Kuma make one final sacrifice by giving his life essence in order to unlock Aja's final form. In the last chapter, CY choosing to leave her mortal form behind in order to save her friends was a good emotional moment. The scene was beautifully drawn, and every part about the prophecy and visions came together. Plus, Kuma's death was already heartbreaking, and it was another blow that CY would also have to leave the heroes so soon. Overall, I give this comic 3.5 out of 5 stars. The characters were good, but it may have been better to focus on 2 heroes and 2 demons in order to cut down on the amount of arcs. It also would have helped the relationships to be expanded upon if the main cast was smaller. However, the comic was still enjoyable and very creative. It was definitely a solid debut. I hope Arvin will keep improving her craft and wish her the best of luck on her comic journey.